Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of In Defense of. And today I have a very special guest welcoming back to the channel, Mr. Steve Schnee from California. Steve, how are you
How are
doing?
you? I'm doing well. Are you doing well there in
Yeah,
uh
it
what's the weather
it's
like?
uh, hot and kind of sunny some of the time and rainy some of the time. It's wet season here, so
Yeah, you see, I can never get my mind around the fact that you guys celebrate Christmas during the summer.
yeah.
Uh because because all you hear is songs like White Christmas, Let It Snow, Winter Wonderland and stuff. And how does that stuff translate over there? I mean, do you guys still
The
listen to
funny
those
thing is,
songs?
yeah, we still listen to Christmas music. We still listen to those sort of wintry songs. We still have a big roast dinner, even though it's, blazing hot. You know,
Oh,
it's a strange thing, Christmas here, but there have been a few people try to write Australian Christmas songs, but yeah.
like tie me kangaroo down, Santa.
Well, no, actually, there's a wonderful Australian Christmas song called "How to Make Gravy." You should check that one out.
Who's that by? Or
But
is it like a
um,
standard?
yeah, no, it's by Paul Kelly.
Oh, well, then I think I've got it.
Yeah. Anyway, this is our In Defense of. We're going to be looking at another Paul McCartney and Wings album. We've already done one in this series where David Gallagher and I talked about Wings Wildlife. And today we're going to be talking about Wings' 1979 album, Back to the Egg.
Oh,
Now, this is another Paul McCartney and Wings album that got critically roasted when it came out. You would be hard pressed to find a positive review of this album at the time. It didn't sell very well. I believe it did go platinum in the US, but that was based on shipments, and a lot of
yeah.
those ended up in the cutout bins and things like that. So it didn't sell nearly as well as a lot of other Paul McCartney albums. And we're here to defend this album and say that, you know what, there's actually some really worthwhile music on this. Steve, I will hand it over to you to just sort of discuss how this album came into your life and when it did and how you feel about it, generally speaking. And then we'll go through it track by track.
Well, my brother Mike and I, Beatle fans since day one, basically. I was what 2 or 3 months old when they appeared on Ed Sullivan, and I remember it. No, I don't actually remember it at all, but I remember growing up, and the Beatles were always omnipresent in our lives. So then when we got into the solo stuff, I think though, you know, we were aware, My Love, the songs that got played, Another Day, stuff like that. But I don't think that we owned a Paul McCartney album until Band on the Run. And I think my brother got that for Christmas or his birthday one year, 73. And it was amazing. Or was that 74? 73, right? For Band on the
Yeah,
Run?
late 73. So you may have got it in 74. Who knows?
Yeah. So we loved it. And then we followed him ever since. I remember the days, even up to London town, when you would walk into a record store and they'd have a poster on the wall facing out of the glass saying new Paul McCartney album, November 17th or whatever. They always made a big deal out of any Paul McCartney album. And I clearly remember that with London town. By the time Back to the Egg came out in 79, now, first off, by this time I was fully into all the new wave, power pop, all that stuff was going on. And I wasn't hooked on just one thing. It wasn't just punk or, I was just the excitement of everything, even synth pop and things like that. So when I heard, they played the new single and it was Getting Closer. And I was like, holy crud, because this was this great energetic rocker, after the relative and beautiful London Town, which was more of a mellow record, even though there
Mm.
were rockers on there like Morse Moose and whatever the rest of that title is, and then I've Had Enough and Name and Address and stuff, but it was really sort of more of a low key McCartney album. When I heard Getting Closer, it was just mind-blowing because he was rocking. It had an energy to it and it wasn't overproduced. It had a
Mm.
rawness to it that hadn't been on a McCartney record because they've been very glossy previously, ever since Band on the Run. So you're talking about Venus and Mars, Speed of Sound, London Town. And those were very well produced. They sounded good, especially on the radio. But then, man, Getting Closer was just this blast of energy. And so I'm thinking, man, this is his most rocking thing that he's done since maybe Bound on the Run or before.
Yeah.
And I was enthralled. Now, I got the single. I wasn't a big fan of Spin It On because that sounded like they were trying to go punk or something like that, but it was still a really cool song. And then that just got me super excited for the album that came.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible. Now, how did you get into it?
Yeah.
Did you get into it when it was new?
No, well, I was a little bit young when this came out. I would have been about 8 when this came out.
Okay.
I really started exploring the Beatles solo records in the mid 80s.
Okay. Okay.
And I would be picking them up in secondhand record stores.
Yeah.
And, I was a big McCartney fan, still am. And when I got this record, I didn't really know much about it. There were no big hits on this album. So there were no songs that I was really familiar with, songs that were still being played on the radio or anything like that. So it was all brand new to me when I first got this.
Right.
And yeah, I really, really liked it. And I had no idea that it had been so sort of critically hated. We didn't have the internet at the time. And you couldn't sort of go onto Wikipedia and find out about, the background behind the album and all that sort of thing. So for me, it was just a case of, picking it up in the secondhand record store as I was trying to collect all the Paul McCartney and John Lennon and George Harrison, Ringo solo records. So yeah, but it's an album that I really liked from the very beginning. For people who've seen my McCartney top 10, which I will leave a link to in the description, they will know that unlike Wildlife, this one actually did make my top 10. So, I do hold this in pretty high regard. And I know, Steve, you hold it in especially high regard.
I consider it is my favorite McCartney solo album.
Yeah.
And it's still, if people just sat down and listened to the energy, the renewed joy in the music, and how raw it is. Now it's very, it is still very well produced, but there's a rawness to it that, he's back to rocking again.
Yeah. So let's go through it track by track. We might do sort of a couple of tracks at a time because it is a long album. There's 14 tracks on this album.
17 on my CD.
Yeah. You get bonus tracks on the CD as well.
Well, before we talk about the album, we have to remember that the single released before the album, which was either earlier in the year or the sometime in the prior year, was Goodnight Tonight.
Yes.
And that was kind of a disco with salsa type thing. So you didn't know what to expect with this album. Was he going to pursue that? But the B-side of that single was a song called Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, which is in my top 10 McCartney songs of all time.
Yeah.
An incredible song that was relegated to a B-side. Doesn't sound like this album, but it kind of pointed in the direction more than Goodnight Tonight did. So that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. Goodnight Tonight was one of those sort of genre exercises that Paul used to do.
Yeah.
Where he would, just show that he could pretty much dabble in any genre he felt like and pull it off. And it's, I'm not a huge disco fan, but I love that song.
Oh, it's a great song. Especially it's got that, it's just got all these little hook things, and they just left I can imagine them or him recording stuff in the studio and making things up as it goes along and leaving these little catchy parts in the song that other people would have probably not even thought of or left out. So but go ahead.
So, so Back to the Egg starts with sort of a track called Reception, which is kind of a atmospheric kind of track to sort of let you into the album. And then we get Getting Closer as the first proper song on the album.
Hmm.
And as you already said, it was a single, and it was one that you really, really liked.
Hmm. Yeah. See, I think the interesting thing about reception is it kind of gives you an idea of what you're going to hear, but it's as if the listener is tuning in to some foreign radio station or some outer space radio station, and it's preparing you for essentially a playlist. And when you deal with a McCartney record, you don't know what the playlist is going to be. Is it all going to be one thing? Is it going to be 10 separate things? Um, and that's how I feel it's a great little intro to that album.
Yeah, absolutely. And then getting closer. What an energetic sort of first song, isn't it? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it really does have a bit of that. It doesn't particularly sound new wave, but it has a bit of that sort of energy to it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's almost a kind of a power pop kind of song.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. See, that's the thing. People, I think you pointed out something that we should really stress about this album is everyone said it's his punk album. It's his new wave album. No, it's he's not playing punk rock or anything. He's taken the energy, the vibe, the excitement that all that music had basically it was like adrenaline for the music business. Just all of a sudden, instead of this, I'm not saying singer-songwriters are boring, but singer-songwriters are more laid back. Prog is a little bit too intellectual. You need something for the kids. And that's what new wave, punk, and all that brought. And that is what McCartney tapped into, is the energy to draw from that music scene. And he put the energy of it into the album as opposed to, I'm going to write a Squeeze song or I'm going to write a this or that or
Mm.
whatever. Nothing like that at all. It's just that he was so excited by this energy of the music scene that he just put it all into this record.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this song really has that McCartney melodicism to it too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm.
the chorus, the I'm getting closer to it's just
Yeah.
that beautiful sort of McCartney melody. Um, to me, McCartney was always more of a melodicist than a lyricist.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm. My
he
Salamander.
wrote he wrote fine lyrics, but
Mm-hmm.
but to me, the beauty of a McCartney album is those melodies, and
Yeah,
this has it in spades.
absolutely.
And then we
Yeah, I
get
think
the
I was going to say though that
Yep,
getting closer, everybody now, when everybody talks about Back to the Egg, someone always brings up My Salamander.
yeah,
You know, but it's like, here it is. This came out with 79, so we're about 45 years past this album, and people still remember it. So, people may say, "Oh, that's such a stupid line," but guess what? You remember it. You probably
yeah,
remember it more than any top 40 hit that year,
yeah.
except "Cruel to Be Kind" by Nick Lowe. Everybody remembers that. But go ahead.
Well, yeah. So then we get a change of pace with "We're Open Tonight." It's
Mm-hmm.
this much more quieter acoustic song.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lovely song, though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's beautiful. I think this sort of thing started. McCartney did this on Bound on the Run, or not Bound on the Run, on Venus and Mars, London Town, and this album where it's like starts really strong and then he throws in this little ballad. So like Love and Song was off
Yeah,
Venus and Mars. I'm Carrying was off of London Town, and then We're Open Tonight.
yeah,
Which and then of course We're Open Tonight comes in a little bit later, but we'll talk about that.
yeah. But yeah, I always love how he sequences his albums. I think
Mm-hmm,
Paul
mm-hmm,
McCartney sequenced his albums very, very well,
mm-hmm,
especially in the 70s.
mm-hmm,
And then we get Spin It On, which you were mentioning earlier, which really does have, again, it's not a punk song, but it definitely has that sort of energy that it's trying
mm-hmm,
to channel.
mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the fastest McCartney songs ever.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's I mean, even though Junior's Farm, Helen Wheels, all these songs are, in my opinion, better songs. This probably rocks harder than those songs.
Mm,
Uh, and it's not metal. It's not like he's trying to do Helter Skelter or anything like that. But it's this is probably just a fun song. And as I'm talking about it, I'm hearing it in my head, and I'm just
Yeah.
going, well, obviously I like it better than I said just a few minutes ago, because it's such a great, catchy song.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you talk about Junior's Farm and things like that. This one is kind of twice the tempo of those songs.
Yes, yes, yes,
It really is a frenetic pace, especially for Paul McCartney.
yeah.
And then we get the lovely and unfortunately only Denny Lane song on the album again and
Hmm.
again and again.
Hmm.
Of course, we lost Denny late last year, which was
Yeah,
very, very sad.
yes,
But I always love it when Denny gets a lead vocal and a writing credit. And this is
right.
one of his best Wing
Yep.
songs, I reckon. What do you think?
I dig it. I think that, was Denny as good as McCartney on any level? Is anybody as good as McCartney on like songwriting and vocals and stuff like that? But see, the thing is you can say the same thing about anybody that McCartney has worked with. McCartney is upper level. Denny Lane is McCartney's had three great foils in his career. And so his best material came out with three great foils. Number one, as we all know, John Lennon with
Yeah.
the Beatles. Somebody to work off. Number two, Denny Lane. If people think that Denny Lane was just a yes man, they are sorely mistaken, because McCartney did some great work with Denny Lane, and he probably got a lot of feedback from Denny Lane, or maybe he could see Denny Lane frowning and he thought, oh, well, maybe I should change that. And then the third great collaborator, great foil, was Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
And that was just very, very, very temporary. But with Denny, very talented individual, and I think more talented than people give him credit for, because he was up against McCartney.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think I think Denny should have had more songs on Wings albums, but then everybody would have complained that there wasn't enough Paul.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yes.
But
Yes.
but this is a wonderful song. This would, of course, be the last
Uh-huh.
Wings album. So this would be the
Hmm.
last Denny Lane song on a Wings album.
Hmm.
But it's a great way to go out.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful song. Then we get Old Siam Sir, which was the song when I first got this album. This was the song that I really gravitated
Yeah.
to.
Amazing. You go ahead and share your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard it, it just had this great. I mean, it's got this sort of chugging energy to it. It's not a
Yes.
particularly fast song, but it's got this real sort of groove to it. And Linda is playing this lovely little thing on the keyboards, the
Hmm. Hmm.
which I really love that. And Paul is singing in that high register, that almost Little Richardy kind of register.
Yeah, the oh darling voice, his oh darling
Yeah,
screaming voice.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the lyric is kind of a nonsense lyric, but I really like it, and it's a really catchy song. This was a single too. I think it was the second single?
It wasn't a single in the US.
Oh, okay. I think it was in the UK, and it may have been here as well.
Uh-huh. You see, the thing about Old Siam Sir is, when you get right down to it, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of it, is the fact that more than likely he sat at the keyboard and bah, 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 and he just thought of the song, and it probably wrote itself. And he knew it wasn't a long and winding road. He knew it wasn't a silly love songs, but man, they put so much energy into it. To me, it's very similar to Morse Moose and the Grey Goose from London Town, is the fact that it just sounds like it's completely different than what came before, and it's completely different than what came after, on the album. Yet it's just it's super catchy. Yeah, and I can't believe that a lot of McCartney fans, or I'm sorry, not McCartney fans, but just a lot of music fans haven't heard great stuff like this, because it just deserves a lot more attention.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why I do these shows, is to
Yeah.
sort of bring attention to these albums that people probably haven't listened to,
Yeah.
because people, talk so much trash about them. They think, oh, it's not worth my time. ladies and gentlemen, this album is absolutely worth your time.
I I think okay, yes, I think that's part of it too. But I think also, you know, I like Bucks Fizz. I like Sex Pistols. I like Andy Williams. I like The Clash. I have. I don't care what people think about what I like. I'm going to love what I love, and I think some people, they hear people talk bad about this album, and they're almost afraid to like it because it's like,
Yeah,
oh God, will I be uncool? It's like I don't look. I was born uncool. So
yeah,
I am perfectly fine loving Back to the Egg. And it's not a fake excitement. It's just, when I put this on, it still sounds good today. You
yeah,
know, it's not dated. But go ahead.
yeah. But yeah, no, it's just it does. I know from my own experience that other people's opinions can sometimes make you not want to check an album out. Like
Oh,
when I was
totally. Yeah.
getting I was getting into in the sort of 90s, I was getting into Jethro Tull.
Uh-huh.
And for ages I avoided the album A Passion Play because
Okay.
I'd heard all these, people saying, oh, it's overblown and it's pompous and it's
Mm-hmm.
this and
Mm-hmm.
it's that and it's until I eventually picked up a copy cheap on CD and I listened to it. I was on a work trip down in Melbourne, which is like a 2-hour flight from where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it alone in my hotel room on headphones on a little CD Walkman. And the first time I listened to it, I thought, this album's great. What are people talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
See, I thought
Um,
that you were going to say A when you talked about
yeah,
Jethro Tull, because that's the one that a lot of people talk crap about.
yeah, that one too. But so side one of the record finishes with Arrow Through Me, and this again is a completely different kind of song. This is
Yep.
almost getting into kind of a synthy kind of sound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really lush. I love this
Mm-hmm.
song.
Here's the thing about this is, okay, it's a beautiful song. Okay. Now, one thing that we haven't really mentioned is that there's a little rasp in McCartney's
Mm,
voice. So, this isn't like him, the early stages of old man voice that he has now. This is him because he's just letting it go. He's rocking out. He's having a good time. And then when Arrow Through Me comes along, Arrow Through Me comes along, it's like, now it's the soft song. This actually sounds like it would have fit on London Town.
mm.
Like, and then maybe take Morse Moose and the Grey Goose off, put it on Back the Egg, take Arrow Through Me off and put it on London Town, and they would have made sense on those albums.
Yeah,
Switching them. But I love it that it's here because again, has any of these songs on this album repeated itself? Or has McCartney repeated himself at any point on this album so far? No, he has not.
no,
He has crafted these great songs
yeah,
that none of them sound alike, but they are all distinctly McCartney.
yeah. I've heard some people say that this song almost kind of channels a certain sort of Stevie Wonder vibe.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Oh yeah.
that
I can
sort of
hear that.
late 70s Stevie Wonder sort of
Yeah.
sound that he was going for and that sort of thing.
And the horns, keyboard horns and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Worth pointing out that this is the first album in a long time that Paul didn't produce himself on his own. He actually produced this with Chris Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably why it has that slightly more stripped back sound too, because
Yeah.
Chris Thomas was kind of famous for that sort of thing, especially in the late
Pretenders,
70s.
Pistols. He did Badfingers Wish You Were Here.
Yeah.
You know.
So then side two starts off with the Rockestra theme. I mean, you've got this massive group of musicians. You've got people like David Gilmour and Hank Marvin and Pete Townsend, John Paul Jones, Gary Brooker, all these huge names coming together to play this piece of music, which he won a Grammy Award for best rock instrumental.
First off, it's probably the world's biggest supergroup.
Yeah,
Because remember, back in late 70s, early 80s, super groups just started popping up. Nobody gives this thing credit because it's rockestra, because he called everyone together the rockestra.
Yeah.
And it is so it's super catchy. Now, so, is it too busy? It can be too busy, but it's just so fun because it's a great hook, and there's great break. It's got a lot of dynamics, and how he was able to pull it off with all these great musicians is beyond me. But I'm glad he did. Unfortunately, this might be the reason that's holding the box set up. But
Yeah.
who knows?
I was going to mention that, that he's been doing all these wonderful box sets and things like that, and this one hasn't come out yet, and I'm dying for him to release this one.
Yeah, me too.
But you're right. It might be a lot to do with getting the rights and
Yeah,
all that sort of thing from various
everybody's signing off.
musicians.
Yeah.
But then we get the lovely song "To You."
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's that
such a
raw
pretty song.
guitar that starts it off.
Yeah,
Again, this is how many songs were on side one?
7.
Okay, so yeah, we're 9 tracks into it, and none of the songs sound the same.
Yeah,
But they all operate in the same universe, and this is another great song. Uh, Again, the energy. It's the energy that is just coming through him.
mm,
Like I said, people call, oh, it's the new wave album. I said it before. No, it's just that energy.
yeah,
He feels renewed. I mean, you haven't heard McCartney feel this loose in a long time.
yeah. I have to admit, this is probably the one song on the album. I still like this song, and I like it quite a lot. But
Uh-huh.
it's probably the one song on this album that if I'm just mention the title, it doesn't immediately sort of pop into my head as to
Uh-huh.
how
Yeah.
it goes and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I have to sit down and listen to the record.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's not a great song, but it's just the one for me that doesn't sort of immediately come to mind when I think of the titles on this album. But
Yeah. All you got to do is
that's a
just,
me thing.
yeah, all you got to do is just think of that opening guitar riff or whatever. And then I remember. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. When I put the record on and it starts playing, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot this was on the record. Um,
Well, at least it isn't, was it for you?
yeah.
Go ahead.
So then we get a couple of songs that actually are a little bit similar. We've got a couple of sort of medley songs. We've got
Yes.
After the Ball and Million Miles. And
Oh,
then we've got
so
Winter Rose and Love Awake.
every, it seems the same thing he did with Abbey Road, the thing, side 2 of Abbey Road. He probably had these songs that were kind of finished but not finished, and he just thought, you know what, let's put them together. I think Chris Thomas might have had something to do with that, because Chris Thomas did that for Badfinger on the Wish You Were Here album, when he put In the Meantime, Some Other Time Together, and Meanwhile Back at the Ranch, and Should I Smoke together for Badfinger. This is probably a thing, is like, hey, these 2 songs are very the same mood.
Mm.
Why don't we go ahead and put what is it, After the Ball and
Million Miles.
yeah, Million Miles, and just the songs, just the minute I see the titles, they're going through my head. And
Yeah, exactly.
and it's wonderful because they're more tender than the rest of the album.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea, just putting these 2 songs together and making it work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you get the same thing with Winter Rose and Love Awake, don't you? I mean,
Yeah.
Winter Rose is a beautiful song, and then Love Awake kind of, it's almost like Winter Rose. You've got that wintry kind of feel. It's a bit sort of, it's not, dark as in, dark and brooding and that sort of thing, but it's got a kind of a midnighty feel to it.
Right.
And then Love Awake comes along, and it's like the sun coming up.
Yeah, it's like springtime.
Yeah.
And the great harmonies, that Love Awake. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally. Yeah. See, I laugh, I chuckle when I think about this, because I'm just going, this is just an incredible record. And I don't understand, the hate, but go ahead.
Yeah. But then we get the broadcast, which is another track, a bit like Reception, where it's a lot
Yes.
of sort of radio
Yeah.
and spoken word kind of thing. Both of those tracks kind of remind me of what the Beatles did on I Am the Walrus towards the end of it, when they
Oh yeah,
fed the
absolutely.
fed the
Like found
radio
sounds
tracks
and
in.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. Again, I think that like the broadcast is probably, the Don't Pass Me By the album.
mm,
It's not quite the Revolution number 9. It's very short, but it's just a kind of a nice little link.
yeah,
Where, you know what, if it wasn't on the album, that's okay. See, the thing is about albums to me, I think this is a perfect McCartney album. And even if, the broadcast, I think is just okay. Guess what? There are flaws in the Mona Lisa.
yeah,
There are flaws in the Sistine Chapel. There are flaws in every work of art. And am I calling this a work of art? I'm not saying it's better than Beatles albums or whatever, but I'm just sort of making a comparison that there is so much love about this album, even if there are a few flaws. And
yeah.
and I don't even really consider the broadcast a flaw, but I'm just sort of making this podcast longer by talking about it.
Yeah, no, I actually think it works well in it. I feel like it would be a bit jarring going from the end of Love Awake straight into So Glad to See You Here.
Yeah,
I think it
true.
needed something in between.
Yep.
And I think that's what the broadcast does, is it kind of helps segue between Love Awake and So Glad to See You Here.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, the Rockestra is back for So Glad to See You Here, a big rave up kind of a
Yep.
song.
Great. Whereas Rockestra was essentially an instrumental, this is a McCartney pen track, vocal track. And the surprise is towards the end where they go into We're Open Tonight again.
Yeah. Yeah, he liked to do that, didn't he?
Yes.
With a lot of his albums, like to have a little reprise of earlier songs and things
Yeah.
like that. And I
Yeah.
love little touches like that. I think they make albums so much more interesting.
Because what it does is, here's a really poor example of this. Flock of Seagulls put out their third album called The Story of a Young Heart. And it was
Mm,
kind of a concept album. And the very last song is called Suicide Day. And as the final notes, Suicide Day, and then in the background, you hear the first song on the album playing, the song Story of a Young Heart. And it just makes you go, I got to go listen to that again.
yeah.
And it makes you want to flip the record over or the CD player and put the needle down on it again. That's what this does, because it reminds you, oh, I remember that song towards the front of the album. And then you just realize that you've been on this great little journey, and every song has been different. Even those two little medleys, they're different from each other.
Yeah. But I'm
You
a
know,
sucker for bookending on albums.
yeah,
I just
yeah,
absolutely love it. So,
yeah,
um, but it's a great rave up. So glad to see you here. He's having a lot of
yeah,
fun with it, isn't he?
yes, absolutely.
And then the album finishes with Baby's Request, which is one of those beautiful sort of songs where he's going back into the sort of 20s and 30s feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sort of, I think, probably thinking of his dad's day, of
Yes,
music and
yes.
that sort of thing. But he does it so well. And this is one of my favorites of those sort of genre pieces,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
those sort of 20s and 30s things. You know, I probably like this better than a song, say, You Gave Me the Answer.
Right,
Um,
right.
I think this is a beautiful song.
Don't they call that his granny songs?
Yeah, that's what John and Paul and George used to call them. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, the reason he does it is because he's so damn good at it.
Mm.
You just have to deal with the fact that he's going to write something like Honey Pie for the White Album. I can't believe that people like Wild Honey Pie more than the song Honey Pie. And I'm thinking, whoa, are you getting the songs confused here? But this, yeah, I think I would rather maybe have Baby's Request before the broadcast,
Mm.
and then end with So Glad to See You Here, and then it goes into that whole We're Open Tonight thing, and it makes you want to go back to the beginning. But I still love A Baby's Request. And I remember seeing the video.
Yeah.
You know, was that a single?
I don't think it was, but it should have been.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
but
it's worth letting our viewers know at this point too that there was a half-hour TV special
mm-hmm,
that was made
mm-hmm,
about Back to the Egg at the time too,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
which didn't, obviously it couldn't fit all of the songs in, but it had a number of the songs in it.
Yeah.
And it's well worth checking out. I believe you can find it on YouTube and that sort of thing. It's never been officially released on DVD, or at least not the whole thing. I think a couple of the individual songs have. And it has
Yeah.
Good Night Tonight in it too. So
Yes, yes, which is kind of weird because stylistically it doesn't fit in with the album. But then you look at the rest of the album and you're going, well, maybe it does because this album is so varied. It's not, McCartney was never a one-trick pony,
mm.
except on McCartney 3. Um, um, but I I just think it's a brilliant album. It's him. To me, it sounds like him just reconnecting with music. Forgetting, because they hadn't toured in a while.
Yeah.
They didn't tour for London Town, so that probably can wear you down. Write, record an album, then go out on tour for months. Come home, write and record an album, go out and tour, and just rinse and repeat. And they had enough of a break after London Town that, plus he got two new members in.
Yeah.
He got Steve Hawley on drums and Lawrence Juber on guitar. And so there's much younger musicians. They're probably, 15, 20 years younger than Paul. I mean, I could be
Mm.
wrong there. Maybe 10 years younger or whatever. But then again, they're carrying that youthful energy. They weren't punks, but they
No.
were probably around that, and they were able to channel that energy
Yeah.
into the stuff. It's sad that we never got to hear anything beyond this with those two musicians.
Absolutely. Except you can hear a little bit of live stuff for them if you get the concert for the People of Kampuchea
Yes,
album,
yes, yes.
which is a wonderful album to get. It's got like The Who and The Clash and Elvis
Yeah,
Costello and a whole bunch of wonderful people on it. But Wings
yeah,
play it at the end, and they have a rockestra bit as well.
yes, yes.
So that's pretty much the only. And of course, there was the live version of Coming Up,
I was just going to say that. Yes, yeah.
which, funnily enough, that was the single in the US, whereas here in Australia and in the UK, we got the studio version that was McCartney solo.
Yeah, I'm not a live fan, so I prefer the studio version because it's so weird.
Mm.
It's just him being goofy, you know. But to bring up the CD,
Yeah.
this actually adds Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, but it does not add Goodnight Tonight, which is
Mm.
strange. And it also adds Wonderful Christmas Time and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reggae. I felt that those should have gone on McCartney 2
Yes.
reissue, and then they should have put Goodnight Tonight on this.
Yeah,
But
absolutely agree.
you know what? When you get an album this good, okay, if it's missing Goodnight Tonight, no problem, because it does have Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, which to me is a lot better than Goodnight Tonight, and I love Goodnight Tonight.
Yeah. No, couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is our thoughts on Back to the Egg. We both believe that this is a wonderful McCartney album, that if you've never listened to this, you should really, really go and check it out. If you have listened to this, please let us know in the comments what your thoughts on this album are. You know, whether you agree with us, whether you disagree with us, what are your favorite songs on the album, the whole bit. We'd love to see your comments. And yeah, Steve, thank you so much for doing the show with me. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Bicycle Legs. I always love talking with you about whatever the heck we talk about
Thanks.
because it's music.
Yeah. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted. So if you want to go and have a look at some of my other In Defense Of shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my favorite albums of all time, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, including my McCartney show, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Please come and give those all a follow. Links in the description. Join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.